Another tragic shooting by a trans-identifying suspect sparks national debate and claims of a media cover-up as more details emerge.
There was no indication from the family or friends that any violence was underway or that they were in fear of this specific individual.
I'm Daily Wire Executive Editor John Bickley with Georgia Howe. It's Wednesday, February 18th. This is Morning Wire.
Nuclear talks between the U.S. and Iran wrap up with what both sides describe as progress, even as American warships converge on the region.
It doesn't seem that the Islamic Republic has been too heavily invested in trying to restore air defenses, largely believed to be still open to adversary air forces.
And as we close in on the 2026 midterms, a Republican Senate primary in Texas is shaping up into a major political showdown.
I just haven't made a decision on that race yet. It's got a ways to go.
Thanks for waking up with Morning Wire. Stay tuned. We have the news you need to know. In doing almost 5 years of this show, I've never read any ads, but I am so passionate about this specific brand that I asked if I could do my personal endorsement. Our sponsor is Quince, and Quince makes elevated basics with real materials that are timeless and they hold up to real life. In at least 3 cases I can think of, I have both the original designer item and I have the Quince version, and the quality and cut is virtually identical between the two. It is uncanny. I have often wondered how they're able to do it in terms of the quality and price. It turns out Quince works directly with safe and ethical factories, but they cut out the middleman. So you're not paying for that designer label and you're not paying for the brick and mortar store. Refresh your wardrobe with Quince. Go to quince.com/wire for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Also now available in Canada. That's QUINCE.com/wire to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/wire. Tragic new details have emerged following Monday's deadly shooting at a Rhode Island ice rink.
Daily Wire senior editor Cabot Phillips is here with the latest. Hey, Cabot. So we touched on this story briefly yesterday. A lot more details have emerged and a lot of controversy about this case, including the media coverage. Let's start with what we've learned about what transpired. What do we know now?
Yeah, on Monday afternoon, friends and family had gathered for a high school hockey game in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. Just a few minutes into the game, a lone gunman descended from the back row of the bleachers, walked down, and opened fire, killing his ex-wife and one of his sons, and injuring at least 3 others, including his former father and mother-in-law. All 3 victims are still in critical condition. A live stream from the game captured the shooting. We're not going to play that footage for obvious reasons. But in that footage, you can see the players drop their sticks as they realize what's unfolding and scramble off the ice. You then see panicked spectators attempting to flee. But you also see one heroic bystander who, instead of running for safety, ran towards the shooting. You can see him jumping on top of the shooter and seemingly bringing an end to his carnage. Police later praised that man, saying his actions, quote, led to a swift end to this tragic event. During that ensuing scuffle, though, the gunman was able to get off another shot and take his own life. Hours later, one of the gunman's daughters spoke briefly with reporters outside of the police station. It's pretty hard to listen to, but here's what she had to say.
My father was a shooter. He shot my family. He's dead now. He has mental health issues.
So like you said, really hard to listen to. She mentions mental health issues. What have we learned since about the gunman?
So police have since identified the shooter as 56-year-old Robert Dorgan, a man who identified as transgender and went by the name Roberta. We're still waiting for a full investigation into potential motives, what exactly led up to this shooting, but it does appear that his gender identity played a role. For example, back in 2020, shortly after he underwent transgender surgery and started identifying as a woman, his then father-in-law demanded that he move out of the family's home. Dorgan claimed to police that the father-in-law threatened to, quote, have him murdered by an Asian street gang while allegedly using a, quote, derogatory term for transgenders and saying that no such person, quote, is going to stay in my house. The father-in-law was charged with intimidation of witnesses and victims of crimes, but the case was ultimately dropped. However, Dorgan's transgenderism was clearly an ongoing point of friction for this family. In 2021, his then wife cited, quote, gender reassignment surgery and narcissistic personality disorder traits as grounds for their divorce.
So apparently a long history of mental illness and other psychological struggles. Now, there's also reports about his social media activity. Tell us about that.
Right. A social media account appearing to belong to the alleged shooter contains thousands of posts, many of which contain violent pro-trans rhetoric. Just 24 hours before the rampage, the account responded to a post criticizing a Democratic member of Congress who is transgender, saying, quote, "Keep bashing us, but do not wonder why we go berserk." A number of other posts included mocking language of his wife for having an issue with him becoming transgender. And then there were a handful of other posts that included vile anti-Semitic language and outright praise for Hitler.
Now, particularly on the heels of the case in Canada, this has really sparked more debate about the transgender element of this shooting. Speak to us about that. What have we seen in terms of patterns?
Yeah, it is just hard to ignore, John. In recent years, we've seen a spate of high-profile mass shootings carried out by transgender individuals. Earlier this month, again, as you mentioned, there was a trans high schooler in Canada who killed his parents before going to school and murdering 6 more students, injuring a dozen others. Then there was the Annunciation Catholic School shooting in which a trans shooter killed 2 children and injured 18 more. There was a nightclub shooting in Colorado Springs that left 5 dead and 26 injured, a warehouse rampage in Maryland that killed 3 more, and of course the Covenant School shooting here in Nashville, where the trans shooter left a manifesto outlining their hatred of traditional Christian values. If you look at the numbers based on per capita data, transgenders are just considerably more likely to carry out mass shootings than any other group. Now, pro-trans activists have really tried to downplay this trend. This week, for example, a number of mainstream outlets refused to comment on the fact that the shooter was transgender.
Right, like the New York Times.
Exactly. They simply said that they went by 2 different names. But many on the right say it is an important angle to these stories. They say that the growing trend is further proof of the mental illnesses often associated with transgenderism and the oftentimes violent rhetoric that goes along with trans ideology.
Right, it might be a hard reality to face, but we have to look at this if we want solutions. Cabot, thank you so much for reporting.
Absolutely.
Every business is asking the same question. How do we make AI work for us? With NetSuite by Oracle, you can put AI to work today. Our sponsor NetSuite is the #1 AI-powered cloud ERP, trusted by over 43,000 businesses worldwide. It's a unified suite that brings together your financials, inventory, commerce, HR, and CRM into a single source of truth. And that connected data is what makes your AI smarter. So it doesn't just guess, it actually knows your business. With the new NetSuite AI connector, you get total flexibility to use the AI of your choice and connect it directly to your actual business data. Unlike bolted-on tools, this is AI built right into the system that runs your business, helping companies earning millions or even hundreds of millions stay ahead of the competition. If your revenues are at least in the 7 figures, get our free business guide, Demystifying AI, at netsuite.com/morningwire. The guide is free to you at netsuite.com/morningwire. netsuite.com/morningwire.
The U.S. and Iran held nuclear talks in Geneva Tuesday, and both sides are reporting progress.
Joining us now to discuss is Behnam bin Taleblu, the Senior Director of the Iran Program at Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Behnam, thanks for coming back on.
Pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
So we had these big talks yesterday in Geneva. What are you hearing? How did things go from both sides?
Well, it seems like, again, the Iranians are taking a page from their playbook in 2025. The Americans, just like in 2025, also have been tight-lipped about it, but the Iranians have been quite keen to shape the information space after every single round of talks, keen to say things that are going well so that they can potentially dilute President Trump's resolve or willingness to use military force. But there's also another factor here that has been not really discussed as to why the Iranians keep taking to the media after every round. And that is they are trying to take the wind out of the wings of Iranian protesters. They're trying to clip dissent and tell the Iranian people, hey, look, that guy who promised helping on the way, who said to make Iran great again, is actually quite keen to talk to us rather than to help you out. And there is a lot of political signaling going on in what are supposed to be technical negotiations to maximize Iran's nuclear disarmament.
Obviously, this is a very complicated negotiation process for the Trump administration. We've seen the deployment of more forces to the Middle East, a show of force in that way. What can we glean from what action we've actually taken in terms of the armed forces?
Well, in terms of the assets that President Trump has been bringing more and more into the CENTCOM area of operations, there is a second carrier strike group coming into the region as we speak. And by the way, that actually has the biggest U.S. vessel in the world, the USS Gerald Ford. very large aircraft carrier. There's
Right.
already more missile defense assets in the region. There's already more electronic warfare assets in the region, as well as many, many more strike fighters, including by us and by our allies. All of this sharpens the knife against the neck of the Islamic Republic. But lest we forget, this regime is doing things physically as well. It's hardening what's left of its nuclear infrastructure. It has more and more missiles that it's been producing, many of which are stored in underground missile bases across 3 different island chains in the west, center, and east of the country. So there's 2 physical stories quietly taking shape. The Iranians are trying to build back better and survive a potential another round of conflict, while the Americans are trying to bring more assets into the theater to get Tehran to back down.
This standoff is being triggered, of course, by the repression of the Iranian regime of people demonstrating against the government. There's been a blackout, but do we know what's going on now on the ground?
Unfortunately, we do know. We do know there's executions that are still being carried out. Donald Trump once mentioned that that was his red line, but there have been about 417 reported executions in the month of January and February alone this year by the governments of the Islamic Republic. The regime, under the cover of darkness, killed anywhere from 36 to 43,000 Iranians in a 2-day period. That goes back to numbers and rates that we see from World War II and the Holocaust, particularly with Babi Yar in Ukraine. This is a regime that believes it can shoot its way through the crisis. And as Washington entertains more negotiations, the regime is trying to avoid getting caught in a 2-front war at home and abroad all at once. So most unfortunately, while everyone is focusing on the military hardware and talks, the Islamic Republic is cracking skulls at home.
Where do you see this going? Is this going to ultimately be another Trump administration strike against Iran in the coming days or weeks?
I do believe it's more likely than the president will strike. I do believe the Iranians will nonetheless try to paint the picture of having gotten really close to a deal. I'm not a poly-market man, and I'm also not good with numbers, but if I had to put some numbers on it, I would say less than 20% chance of a meaningful deal, about a 70% chance of a strike, with a huge question mark over what is the political aim of that strike and the duration of that strike. And then about 10% of mudding along and limping along, military containment plus more sanctions.
Well, it's hard to imagine the current status quo to go on too much longer, but we'll see. Ben, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate your expertise.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
The 2026 midterms are starting to heat up, with a critical Republican Senate primary in Texas getting nationwide attention and President Trump already getting involved in several contests.
Daily Wire political reporter Cameron Arcand is here with more. So, Cameron, let's start with this Texas race. President Trump weighed in while on Air Force One on Monday night. What did he say?
So the president is not making any specific endorsement as of yet. He said he's not decided as of right now, but he did say he is supportive of all 3 of those candidates. Let's take a look at what he had to say on Air Force One.
I like all 3 of them, actually. I like all 3. So those are the toughest races. They've all supported me. They're all good, and you're supposed to pick one. So we'll see what happens, but I support all 3.
In this race, clearly we've got Attorney General Ken Paxton up against incumbent Senator John Cornyn and Wesley Hunt. This has been an incredibly messy primary at this stage, and voters can start voting as of this week, but if no candidate hits above 50% in that primary, it goes to a runoff in June. Obviously, we've seen a whole slosh of not only political but personal attacks in this race as well, so it makes a lot of sense that Trump has basically said, let them fight it out. I'm going to support whoever wins this race as of now.
So this is a 3-way primary. Can you explain what that means for the general?
So the March 3rd primary has 3 major candidates in it right now, but according to Texas election laws, you have to get over 50% of the vote in order to become a party's nominee. So as we move forward, if no one gets over 50% in that March 3rd primary, there's going to be a runoff between the top 2 candidates. Now, the polling on this has been mixed right now, but it seems like Ken Paxton and John Cornyn might be the candidates that make it to that runoff. Now, what does this mean for the general election? Now, there's only 2 major candidates on the Democratic side, Jasmine Crockett and James Talarico. Now, this race is shaping up to be very, very expensive. Crockett got into the race because she believed she had a better shot at winning if Paxton were to win the primary. Now, what that means broadly is this is a lot of spending in a state that hasn't even elected a Democratic senator since the 90s, but Democrats are confident that in this cycle that they can pull this off. We've seen seen this before with Ted Cruz running against Beto O'Rourke. Didn't work out so great. However, this does mean a lot of resources. Texas is a huge state with a lot of people, so we could obviously see the implications of that nationwide.
Well, Democrats are perpetually hopeful about Texas. Now, Trump waded into some other closely watched races recently. What should people know about the other races we're looking at?
Yes, so he's endorsed in a ton of races, which is what makes the Texas decision to kind of stay out of it so notable. He even endorsed Representative Julia Letlow over incumbent Senator Bill Cassidy in Louisiana just a couple of weeks ago. In New Hampshire, we also saw the president endorse John Sununu over former Massachusetts Senator Scott Brown in that competitive race. But the reason for this, and this is really the important part here, is Republicans have very narrow majorities in both chambers right now. And so it would be critical for the president and for Democrats to either, if you're Trump, you want to keep those majorities, you want to grow them, because right now he's got 53-47 in the Senate and only 218 in the House. That's not a lot to work with for some of his future agenda items. Meanwhile, Democrats want to essentially make President Trump a lame duck president in the most dramatic way possible in 2026 by making sure that they win both of those chambers. So this is why this is so critical here. And we're going to see the president really show his influence in both official and unofficial capacities soon. Trump is set to go to Georgia this week to discuss the economy. Obviously, that's a key swing state going into November.
Well, a lot of races to watch. Cameron, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for waking up with us, and if you're listening to the show, you can now watch the show free on Daily Wire Plus. We'll be back this evening with more news you need to know.